I love this comic. This is Ghost Ship #1 by Jon Lewis. It was published in 1996 by Slave Labor Graphics. Jon Lewis had been working on a series called True Swamp, also published by Slave Labor Graphics, which I also love, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. I think there are 3 issues of Ghost Ship. I have 3 issues of Ghost Ship. And it's a one-man anthology series, so Jon Lewis doing various stories about different groups of characters all in one book. The first story is about a crew of pirates who are afflicted by scurvy, and something you notice right away about these pages is that there are no panel borders throughout, which does a really nice job of evoking the open water setting of the story, and there are lots of shots of ships on open water which stand really nicely without being enclosed by panel borders. And I think it was really impressive to me when I first got this comic, and I had probably been looking at a lot of more traditional conservative page layouts, and it was just something new for me to see that somebody experimenting with the page like this. Something else that I am impressed by is Jon Lewis's simple but powerful drawing. I mean, it's not lavishly illustrated by any means, but the mark making is so beautiful and just does such an effective job of using the comics medium to tell the story in an engaging way. Like, I really love this title lettering at the top here with this simple cursive scurvy, and then these marks below it that beautifully portray the surface of the ocean. So as I pointed out already, the layouts are really unique and creative, and it's just really interesting to examine each page, and I think it's really readable. I know when you experiment with layout like this, there's a danger of getting lost and making the comic confusing, but I love, like, you know, this distant shot of the ship and then showing the action and then close-ups. And there's also just some wonderful cartooning in here. Like, I love this example of this pirate devouring a citrus fruit and the vitamin C healing that he gets for his scurvy just radiating off of him like that. All of these sound effects, just really beautiful. Here's another interesting bit of layout where another ship has spotted the pirate ship, and so they're looking through a telescope, and there are these little circular views of what they see on the pirate ship interspersed with the comments from the crew of this new ship. This is also just a really funny comic, and the dialogue that Jon Lewis writes is hilarious and has a really unique voice. And there are also just interesting surreal flourishes. Like here, when the other ship communicates with the pirate ship by phoning them up. And on the pirate ship, they answer at this payphone that has a little sign that says, "Insert 1 gold tooth." When you experiment with layout to this extent, I guess there's a danger that a comic becomes more difficult to parse, unreadable, but I think this comic is very readable, and I sure read the hell out of it when I got it. I've read this comic so many times. Here's a good example of the fun dialogue in this story. Here, I'm going to do a bit of acting, but this is right after the crew has feasted on a gigantic grapefruit to cure their scurvy. And this older pirate is saying, "But I hope none of my dear friends has chanced to swallow, in our collective excitement, one of the seeds of this glorious fruit." I did, so what?" "Ha! I've heard of this. It gets stuck in your stomach, and all the acids and humors and whatnot collect on it and get hard, and it becomes a magic ruby. We gut gram in a year, everybody. Woohoo!" So that ends the pirate story, and now we're at the second story in this book, which is called Nicholas Leads to Harder Things. And this story is actually set in the True Swamp universe. That was the other series that Jon Lewis was working on at the time. And so True Swamp is the story of the creatures that live in a swamp and sort of their trials and tribulations of their daily lives. So this story does have panel borders, but the layout is still so innovative. And I just think this 2-page spread is beautiful. I don't know how easy it is to see on the camera everything that's going on here, but just there's so much to see, and it really engages the eye. There's a little sequence here of this main character growing up out of the ground and awakening and becoming aware of his environment. And I think it's kind of stunning. So this character here is Lenny the Frog, who's sort of the main character of True Swamp. He's a frog who has a lot of existential angst about, his place in the world of the swamp. And as you can see, just the interesting, engaging page layouts really keep coming. It's amazing how much open space he can leave on a page and still make such a powerful statement. I love when he breaks bits of little conversation into smaller sequences within a larger page. As a cartoonist, it can be really challenging sometimes to portray characters just moving from one place to another in an interesting way, without it just being a bunch of boring walking. And here the characters are traversing the swamp, and it shows so many different views and interesting angles and things. Here's a parallelogram panel. You don't see that too often. They're visiting one of the main True Swamp characters, this marmot named Hale, sort of the scientist of the swamp. Like this page just knocks me out, how there's this tall panel on one side and then this panel with lots of space around it, but the dialogue is outside the panel so as to give the drawing itself room to breathe. And then there's this little 6-panel sequence down here, sort of just a comic strip within the page showing the conversation between the characters. Here's a fun sequence where Lenny the Frog spots out of the corner of his eye a threat, which turns out to be a snake. And so he sort of sees a splash in his eye. It shows his eye, and then there's this S shape, which I think is just to indicate his sort of peripheral awareness of a snake. And then he leaps and says, "Run." It's a really fun sequence. So I think that I don't know if this first story, Scurvy, has ever been reprinted, but the second story, the True Swamp story, was actually reprinted in a recent collection of True Swamp published by Uncivilized Books. They did 2 volumes so far of collecting True Swamp in this hardcover form. This came out in 2017, and the same story is in there, although it's interesting. I see that there are some changes. The pagination is a little bit different. But anyway, I really highly recommend all of True Swamp, and these collections are recent and available. So I would definitely recommend them to pick up. Yeah, so that's Ghost Ship #1, a comic that I love. If you come across it in a back issue bin, I recommend you grab it. I actually found one recently, so they are out there. All right, that's it. Let me know if you're interested in this sort of video. I have lots of other comics that I love that I'd be willing to show off and talk about, but I don't know how interesting it is to watch, but I thought I'd give it a shot. All right, see you later. Bye.